Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Madison Lowe, and I'll be the moderator for this panel. I'm currently a 3L at Berkeley Law, and I'm one of the co-chairs of ABBA's Law Students Committee, along with Diana Godwin, who's our host for this stream and helping me with all the behind-the-scenes technology, and our third co-chair, Yongbin Chang. If you're not yet an ABBA member, you should definitely consider joining. It's only $25 for students, and it lasts until you graduate. ABBA has lots of events every month, from educational panels like this one to networking opportunities to social events. Our committee is very excited about today's event. The panelists are all accomplished attorneys here in the Bay Area. They represent a wide range of legal sectors that law students are interested in and have summer positions at. And they are incredible mentors who I'm sure will offer some really helpful advice. And we're going to cover a few main topics. One of them is building relationships, including in a virtual setting. The second is impressing supervisors. And the third is planning ahead for career development beyond this summer. And we'll end with some time for questions as well. So if you think of anything during the event, feel free to type your questions into the chat and we'll address them during the Q&A session. Okay, so let's get started with introductions. I'd love to start by asking each of our attorneys to introduce themselves. Please tell us about your background and how you got to where you are today. And I will go in order of first name. So first up is Josh.
Hi, everyone. Josh Banerjee, nice to meet you. Thanks for spending time, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to spend some time with you this afternoon. I'm in-house counsel at NorCal Cannabis Company, and just by way of background and kind of at the surface level, I have a pretty traditional kind of background and progression with foundational training at a big law firm, and then kind of moving progressively to different in-house opportunities based on my experience and interests, kind of starting off at BlackRock in a large legal and compliance team globally, and then kind of moving to successively smaller legal teams from there on out. And at NorCal Cannabis, I'm on a mighty team of two that pretty much handles every type of legal issue that you can think of. And while my traditional kind of training and background is in corporate securities and transactional, I tend to handle all matters across the spectrum: HR, IP, some management of litigation, everything kind of across the board. And so, I think for myself, just kind of thinking about how I progressed through my career, it was really just thinking through kind of what would be most fulfilling for my career. As a business-oriented person, in-house was kind of always what I felt was going to be the right move, and I had a few key inflection points along the way that I'm sure we'll get into some details on future questions about how I kind of actually made that transition from in-house, from private practice at a law firm to in-house and to where I am today.
Perfect. Thank you, Josh. Next up, we have Miriam.
Hi, everyone. Miriam Kim. I'm a partner at Munger, Tolles & Olson in San Francisco. I'm a litigator specializing in trade secret work. And my path here started at Berkeley Law School. I graduated in 2002 and then started my career at another law firm, Goodwin Procter in Boston. I clerked on the First Circuit and then came back to Munger, Tolles & Olson, where I had been a summer associate. So I've been here now for 16 years. Happy to be with you guys today.
Thank you, Miriam. Next, Monica.
Hi, everyone. My name is Monica Lavoski. I'm the managing attorney of Asian Pacific Islander Legal Outreach. We have offices in San Francisco and in Oakland. Let's see, during law school, I was a summer associate at a firm in San Francisco. I went to law school in Boston called Minami Tamaki, and you'll actually hear from one of their partners later on this panel. So that's what brought me out to San Francisco. And I spent 10 years in private practice civil litigation at 3 different firms where I worked my way up to partner, practicing general civil litigation all the way through. So I have a broad array of experience, everything from employment, civil rights, consumer, personal injury, med mal, gosh, real estate, lots of different stuff. Let's see, after 10 years in private practice, I decided to make the move into nonprofit work, which was always one of my goals. And I'm really glad I got that broad experience before moving into nonprofit work, although there are a lot of different ways to move into the nonprofit scene. So currently, as I mentioned, I'm with Asian Pacific Islander Legal Outreach as the managing attorney. I still do practice. All attorneys at API LO do. I spend about 25% of my time representing domestic violence survivors in DV actions, restraining orders, and family court. And I spend about 75% of my time doing management now, which includes hiring and supervising the summer clerk program, as well as the staff attorneys and the legal team. I also do a lot of operations, HR, development, grants, and I also run our clinics program. So I may know some of you who volunteer with us on a regular basis. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Monica, and a great transition to Sean.
Hi, everyone. Sean Tsumura. I work at Minami Tamaki. We're a 15-attorney law firm in San Francisco. I started off as a summer associate at the firm when I was in law school. I was interested in doing class action employment cases and impact litigation. After I took the bar, came back to the firm to work on a few antitrust class actions that they had. So I began working on those kind of cases primarily. I joined our firm's summer law clerk committee and was on that for about 4 years, and then was in charge of supervising summer clerks for about 4 years after that. I became a partner in the firm in 2017, and this January became the managing partner of the firm. So now, in addition to casework and managing a practice group, I do a lot of the firm administration as well. So my day-to-day is really wearing a lot of different hats and working with a lot of different people within the firm to help run the business. So glad to be with you all today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Sean. And last but not least, we have Sue.
Hi, my name's Sue Ra. I'm an attorney with the Alameda County Public Defender's Office. I've been an attorney here for about 14 years, and I began my legal journey at USF, where I graduated and then became a post-bar while I was waiting for my results, and then got hired here, and I've been here ever since. I currently am in charge of recruitment, in addition to my regular job as an attorney within the office with my own caseload. I also manage grants and do some community outreach on behalf of the office. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, thank you everyone for your introductions. We'll get started with the questions now. So the first category of questions relates to building relationships and building reputations. Both of these are tough to do, and many students will have to do them virtually this summer, so that adds on another layer of challenges. I'll start off with Monica. I'm wondering if you have any advice for students on how to give their best to a virtual workspace, and in particular, some best practices for communication, whether that's with supervisors, their colleagues, or even their clients.
Absolutely. So we're coming into a second summer of either virtual or some sort of hybrid virtual program at Apilo. So, last summer was a learning experience, certainly. Advice I have for law students in terms of, I think those are kind of two different questions. In terms of setting up the virtual experience for yourself, I think it's really important to remember that even though you're virtual, you're still in a professional environment. Something I've run into a lot, and especially I think in the nonprofit world, which tends to be a little more casual, we don't wear suits a lot in the office, in a nonprofit office, is that people might take the casual element of it a little too far virtually. So I totally get that you might be zooming in from your bedroom or your shared apartment or your home where multiple other people live, and we're all living in that situation right now. But doing your best, especially when meeting with clients or in court or really even meeting with superiors, to put some sort of neutral background behind you, even if I don't know that your computer's sitting on the laundry machine. but something neutral behind you, and to look somewhat professional. Put on a clean blouse or a button-down shirt or something. If I can see it, it should look like something that that you would want to present as in person in the office. And I have seen that taken a little bit, I think, too far. And this is an opportunity for you to make an impression, and it never hurts to make a professional one. So in terms of the virtual workspace, we understand that your dog might be barking or there might be other people in the house. That happens. But do your best to try to present professionally. And then in terms of communication in the virtual workspace, I think it takes a little bit more kind of proactive effort. When you're in the office, you're going to run into colleagues and superiors and other people you work with in the hallways and get a chance to get to know them and make yourself known. And when you're virtual, you kind of have to reach out. You're going to have to make those calls, make those emails, set up those Zooms. So I would highly encourage you to do that. Take advantage when people say, whether it's a staff attorney or a manager like me or just anyone, when they say, hey, reach out anytime, do that. Find a question, make the effort, and even better if you can do it on camera. I know we all have Zoom fatigue, we're all exhausted, but it really helps a lot, especially when getting to know someone initially, to be able to see their face and kind of talk to them face to face, even if it's virtual. And so I would, find a question to ask, do something, just try to make those connections as much as possible and to take advantage. Because when I tell people they can call or text or email or set up a Zoom with me, I mean it. And so, I like to see, especially law students and new attorneys, taking advantage of that in particular right now.
Thank you so much, Monica. And then moving on to Sue. So similar to the communication skills that Monica was just discussing, what's your advice on how students can start building meaningful relationships, like, moving from that one phone call to a true relationship and network? And I see that you're in the office, so feel free to offer advice both for the virtual setting as well as in person.
I'm going to start with just in general, because I think that's applicable wherever and whenever will be. I think it's really important to kind of look around and be active in thinking about who you would like for your mentors to be. I think particularly in my office, there's been more thought towards building like structures to facilitate that type of a relationship and encourage it, by us telling people to seek those types of relationships out and offering like mentorship programs and things of that nature. But when I started, there really wasn't any of that. You kind of looked around at a bunch of very, very busy attorneys. You kind of found the people that you wanted to emulate and the people that you respected. And then you hung on for dear life to try to make sure that they cared about you and paid attention to you by like coming to them with questions, trying to be helpful, and just making yourself visible. I think that is harder to do, admittedly, in a virtual setting, but it is not impossible by virtue of the fact that there will be people giving you work. And it is an opportunity for you to be proactive about asking questions, being thoughtful, seeking advice about how to approach or think about different legal issues. In my particular circumstance, public defense is completely wrapped up in like social justice issues, current events, pending legislation that's passing through the House, and so there are subject areas that are ripe for conversation that you should find opportunities to talk to people in the office about, because that is not only a chance for you to learn from them, but for an opportunity for you to show that you are really interested in what the mission of the office is, and that you are a person of substance that can bring like a perspective and value to that organization.
Thank you so much. Before I switch gears a little bit, just want to give a chance for anyone, if you want to add on anything about virtual work or relationships, feel free to jump in.
Well, I can add in on building relationships. I think I've been really fortunate, especially when I was supervising the summer law clerks, to build some really great relationships where, these are law students who went on to become great successful attorneys now, and we become co-counsel and become friends, and they refer cases to us, and we can support each other in our careers. And so I kind of reflected on that and thought, how did we build those relationships? And I think at the end of the day, they got to know us as people, and we got to know them as people. They didn't just look at us as something that they could put on their resume. So I would tell the law clerks, when we were all in the office, I would say, to come out from their cubicles and to come to the other side of the office and walk around, create opportunities to have conversations with people. And they always kind of react like I'm trying to trick them or something, because they're often so focused on keeping their heads down and finishing their assignments. But part of the reason we hire you is because we liked you as a person, and we wanted to work with you, and we wanted to get to know you as a person. So if you're just at your computer and not interacting with us, you're actually not fulfilling part of the job that we hired you for. So please, we really do want to get to know you. So take advantage of that. And I think that's how a lot of great relationships are built, through what is a relatively short summer law clerk experience that lasts far beyond, just that summer.
Hey, this is Miriam. The only thing I'll add on working remotely is it's just so critical to work on your virtual presence. And I cannot emphasize that enough. Like, you will make a first impression within the first 30 to 90 seconds that someone sees you on the screen. So in addition to all the things that Monica said, I highly recommend that you watch some videos with tips on how to do public speaking. My favorite is Kara Hale Alter, but there are others you can Google and see, or you can just watch what other people do and get some tips about lighting, about audio, tone of voice, volume, etc. And make sure that your first impression comes across as someone who is credible, competent, confident, responsible, ready to do this job. And that, if you need to practice with somebody, practice. Related to that, I will say, if you join an office and they use a platform you've never used before, make sure you install it and work out any technical kinks before you meet with whoever you're reporting to. Like, ask the office manager, ask the receptionist, ask an assistant, ask another student who started a couple weeks before you to have a virtual meeting with you, so you can make sure your audio and your video looks okay. Because people are very understanding in this environment, but it's still not an ideal situation if I'm meeting you for the first time and for some reason your video is not working, or for some reason your audio is terrible, or I can hear something in the background that you didn't realize I could hear. So work that stuff out.
Thanks, Miriam. And I actually had a question related to this, so I'll come to you. So you were talking about presence on video for first impressions and trying out technology platforms. What are some other things that Summers might forget that actually matters a lot for their reputation?
Yeah, I think the things that Monica mentioned are obviously important, but I think the most important thing beyond the first impression when someone meets you is the quality of your work. So, I cannot emphasize enough. I don't disagree with what has been said about building relationships, but that has to be on top of doing excellent work, because people are not going to hire you if the work does not meet their standards. And so it's very important to make sure that whatever you turn in is your best work. And I know in this day and age, we've got a lot of stuff going on. Maybe you have sick family at home. Maybe you've got, a ton of different things you're dealing with. Well, you got to work that out, and you got to make sure what you turn in is your best possible work. And if you're not going to be able to turn in your best possible work on the day you're asked to turn it in, figure that out in advance and ask, hey, Sean, is it okay if I get that to you on Monday instead of Friday? Ask him that 3 or 4 days in advance. and if it's not okay, then maybe you and Sean can work out, well, what can you get done by Friday, you know, so that whatever you give is your best work. And sometimes to do that, that means you should like run it by someone. Like whenever summer associates start, and like new lawyers start, I always tell them, hey, like, don't be afraid to like send me your first draft if you want me to look at it before you turn it into so-and-so. And no one takes me up on that now, and probably just because I'm so senior, like I get it. Like you don't want to give me your first draft, but like I hope you take up that offer and you make that offer to you know, people who are more junior to you. 'Cause like that's something we can all do to help one another.
Thank you so much. And Josh, I'll come to you for the last question in this section. What is your advice for summers on balancing their assignments with other obligations? So just as an example, how could they think about an invitation to a social event when they still have a work deadline coming up? Or for 2Ls who are participating in fall OCI, how can they balance networking with future employers during the summer while still at their current summer job?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. It's a thing that everyone struggles at, you know, whether you're a summer associate, practicing attorney for 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, 15 years, whatever might be the case. I think, you know, given the summer associate context and that you're really trying to build to something bigger, prioritizing networking in your first impression is important. And like Miriam was saying, you know, when you have to balance deadlines, do exactly that. You know, try to find out if you're not going to be able to make something, try to, you know, make a certain deadline, try to see if you can work out an extension or do things because you have these other conflicts, and really try to get a sense of like what's a priority. And I think that's another thing that senior attorneys look at, like, how can you prioritize your own workload, your personal life, what's important, what's not, even within the specific substantive issues that you're dealing with. There's always going to be a prioritization. It's going to be a little bit of a struggle. And at first, you won't know. Sometimes I don't know what my priorities are when I walk in that morning, and you kind of have to consult with other people that you trust and that you work with to try to understand what's important to them and who you're serving, particularly your clients, understand what their priorities are and kind of map that onto your time schedule and move forward from that standpoint.
Perfect. Thank you. Does anyone else want to add anything before we move on to the next section?
I would just add that I totally agree with Josh. It's about priorities, but I know that I personally, and a lot of people I know, I don't expect law students to guess what their priorities are, or new attorneys. So what I'd like to see is someone come to me and say, Monica, I have this memo, I'm working on this motion, and I've been invited to this networking event. Can you help me to understand what my priorities should be? Or whatever it is. You know, that is something that we as supervisors can help you with, and that's part of the learning experience. It's something I expect from law students. It's something I expect from the supervisors that I supervise. These are constant conversations because, you know, yes, your work product has to be really good, but, you know, sometimes there's an important outreach event that we're doing, or there's something that I feel would be really good for your personal career development that I do want you to prioritize going to. And you know, I think that there are ways to talk about that and to decide what those priorities are. You know, and I also know that, you know, in our case, it's very rare that a case starts and ends within the 10 weeks that you're with us. So, you know, you're working on a small part of a much bigger whole. And so we want you to get that great experience, but that experience with us is not just about the work product you're doing. It's also about the advocacy and the community outreach and the experience and the growth that you're going to have. So I would say that, you know, priorities are the most important thing, but you talk to your supervisor about what those should and can look like for your own personal balance and also for the good of the organization you're with.
Perfect. Thank you so much. The next topic is about impressing supervisors and creating impressive work product. So this is something that many students are nervous about before they start their jobs. And as Miriam mentioned, this is key for hiring too. So Sean, I'd love to hear your thoughts. When you supervise summers, what do you expect from them? And what are some things that previous summers have done that really impressed you?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing that we would start off with is, of course, meeting deadlines. I think we can all talk about that. So I kind of want to talk about some other things. I think as a small firm doing litigation, I'm looking for usable work, and which which means I want the summer clerk to think about what they're giving me and how it's going to help our client and our case, because it's literally something that I could be plugging into a motion that day. And every lawyer that you work for, even in a small firm, is going to be different. And I think that's also something we'll talk about in this panel. But you know, to me, I'm more on the side of I want to know what the answer is, and then, you know, where do we go from there, and to spend the time then working with the law clerk on what the next step is. As Miriam said, you should absolutely always do your best work, but I'm not really one of those attorneys who's really critical about formatting. And if I see a typo, I'm not going to automatically ding you. I really actually don't want the summers to be spending extra hours proofreading something that they're going to give me, you know, for every last, you know, period and comma. I would rather spend that time with you, you know, talking through the issues and thinking about next steps. I'm also really impressed when law clerks can look at a legal question and find the answer that's most helpful for our side. I think that's something that I made mistakes on when I was a law clerk. I remember I worked for an attorney named Mori, who's an ABA member and who's a mentor to a lot of law students, and she's a clerk on the California for the California Supreme Court. And I did an assignment for her, and she came back and she told me that, you know, maybe I knew what the law was, but that I have to write, you know, I have to look at what's the argument that's going to help her client and her case. And I think that was something. So I'm always impressed when law clerks are thinking like advocates for our clients, which is something that I think is hard to do even when we tell them that's what we're looking for. They have to go beyond just issue spotting, and that's what's really impressive to me and helpful to us as a firm, and that I remember.
That's super helpful. Thank you. And then Miriam, you kind of touched on this in your previous answers for like asking attorneys to look through drafts, but do you have any additional advice on the process of ensuring that work product is impressive? In particular, if it's the student's first time doing this kind of work, how can they make sure that it's still high quality?
Yeah, I think the most important thing in the process is that you understand the assignment. I think some people, you know, they come to the meeting to get the assignment, and like these days I hear them typing furiously, like everything I'm saying. And then they don't ask me any questions. And I'm like, do you have any questions? And they've been so busy just typing literally what I'm saying that they're not like listening and thinking through it. And that's okay, because I get it, like it's overwhelming. So if that happens to you and you can't think of any questions in the moment, at minimum, you should probably ask like things like, when do you need this? How long do you think it should take? Do you have any samples? If it's like a brief, like those are some like basic good questions, okay? But if you actually like really listen to what they're saying, or maybe go away and reflect on it, then you might have some additional questions like, you know, okay, can you explain to me, this is about, you know, I understand you want me to research attorney-client waiver, you know, privilege waiver. Should I also be thinking about attorney work product, or, you know, is there this, you know, or I remember in my CIP Pro class, we talked about, you know, potential waiver because there's no common legal interest. Is that something I should think about? You know, like you might have some insightful questions that will help you understand what's the scope of the project. And I would definitely make sure you ask some questions before you turn in the first draft, because sometimes what happens is we give an assignment, somebody goes off to do it, and then like we don't hear anything from them, and they go off into some rabbit hole that really they didn't need to go down, and it became like this really stressful exercise. And if they had just come back and said, you know what, I started looking into this, and then I saw now there's this issue in the waiver context about, you know, what's the scope of there can be a subject matter waiver, and what's the scope of the subject matter waiver. And like maybe I would tell them, you know what, no, I don't want you to get into the scope of the subject matter waiver. I just want you to get into whether it's waived or not. That would have been good for you to know and would have saved you a lot of time, right? So I think it's good to remain in communication and make sure you understand the assignment.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that too. You know, I think understanding expectations is pretty key. And I'll be totally honest. A lot of times when I give out assignments to junior attorneys, I'm not even sure what I'm looking for at that point in time. A client will say, here's my issue, and you're just kind of running off and going. And so sometimes being able to take a step back, having a junior person look at this and getting confused and asking the right questions will help the senior person actually figure out like what needs to be done, both from a substantive perspective and also just formatting too. Like asking for examples, like Miriam mentioned, what kind of work product delivery do you want to see? And I think, one of the more frustrating things that senior attorneys have is that they get something back that was unexpected because there wasn't communication, and then you don't know what to do with it. So I think just having that open line of communication, asking lots of questions. If you feel like you're floundering and wasting time, that's your signal to figure out like what you actually need to do or what the expectations are, and go from there.
Can I add one more thing? I think that we keep saying make sure that you ask lots of questions. And for me personally as a supervisor, there is nothing more frightening than an intern or a new attorney that doesn't ask any questions, because then I cannot gauge what is in your mind or what is not in your mind. And so that is, it's always encouraged. But I do want to say, I'm hoping that you guys are picking up on the theme that yes, you are encouraged to always ask questions and ask them frequently, but do so thoughtfully. Because if just you start blurting out the first question that comes into your mind, then if you take a moment and thought, if I actually looked at the penal code that is right sitting in front of me, I'd know the maximum exposure for X thing. You also don't want to ask the kinds of questions that would then, expend energy and time from your very busy supervisor on answering questions that you can easily solve for yourself. And so Miriam gave the example that, she's giving the assignment and everyone's furiously typing. Maybe that's not the moment to ask substantive questions. Maybe you take that assignment back, digest it, do a little bit of research, jot down some notes about the different areas that you think are relevant to the inquiry, and then come back with, I looked at these things. This is how I'm going to approach the issue. I found this case on it. Am I on the right track? Or something to that effect. But I don't want you guys to take away, ask lots of questions, and then just be like, I'm going to ask everything. You should take the time to showcase your ability to think through issues as an attorney. And that kind of dovetails back on what Sean is saying, is that what is different in these types of internships is that you are training to be a lawyer and not just engaging in schoolwork. And so you always have to keep in mind, what is our objective, who is our client, and what is their interest? And every question that you're researching, working on, investigating, whatever the case may be, is to advance your client's interest. And so your thoughtfulness should show that ability to think independently about those types of issues as well.
Perfect. I'll give you a chance to jump in, Monica, too, because all these answers have been so fantastic.
I agree with everything that has been said, and I think Josh hit the nail on the head for me, which is just learn what the expectations are, and everyone spoke to this. I totally agree with everyone that said, ask for a sample. You can say, how many pages do you expect this to be? What length do you expect? I can remember a time recently when I asked someone to look into a quick issue for me, and I got a 20-page law review article back 3 months later. I was like, oh, I clearly didn't give a clear assignment, but you also didn't ask any questions, So, we're all learning as part of this process. Like Josh mentioned, sometimes your questions can help us to clarify too, for you. But just asking and learning what those expectations are, I think is going to help a lot. And I also agree with what Sue was saying, ask good questions. We say a lot to our new staff and law clerks, ask me any question that you have that's, think about the question, but I don't want you to be shy about asking your questions, but I don't want to answer the same question 3 times. Once, great. Twice, maybe. Third time is like, no, think critically. You've already had this question answered. How does this apply to the new scenario? And so, it is about thinking, but also not being shy about making sure you understand what the expectations are.
Thank you, everyone. I wish I could watch this and then go back in time to my summer job. So moving to potential challenges. Sue, I'm wondering if you could share some advice for students on what to do when their workload is too slow, as well as when it's too overwhelming.
In the context of the work that we do as public defenders, your day-to-day is probably going to be too overwhelming in the sense that there are a lot of things happening and a lot of people to be talked to and a lot of moving parts. On the other hand, I can say that when you're in a group of summer interns, the balance of work being distributed based upon like how quickly different projects get finished, I can see things slowing down and the need to speak up would be there. So starting first with when you don't have enough work. 100% absolutely you should speak up and tell somebody. You should always be seeking additional ways to contribute and to enhance like your learning that summer. I don't think that you should be shy about that at all. But also be mindful of the fact that being overly aggressive about asking for work and then getting yourself into a situation where you can't deliver on deadlines or in the type of quality that our other panelists have mentioned is a big problem. And so I think that the key objective there is communication. And it's the way you communicate in a timely fashion. Because if on the day before the motion, you go to your supervisor at 5 o'clock and say, I'm not ready, that is a problem. And that they will tell you, you should have talked to me about this before. And I mean, obviously it's on the supervisor as well to try to keep up with you intermittently, but they might not always have the time or the ability to do that. And so it's on you to be able to communicate those things with them. I really like the fact that Monica and Miriam talked about the fact that you should be approaching your supervisors about different ways to prioritize and to request advice on how you should be approaching different timelines and projects. That is something that a lot of interns are very shy about because I think that they feel like it betrays some kind of inability to do the work or to live up to expectations, but it's quite the opposite actually. It shows that you're on top of things and that you have a sense of, scope and what needs to be done in order to make sure that you turn out a good product. So yeah, that's what I think.
Thank you. And then last question in this category for Josh, what's your advice on handling mistakes? So this could be mistakes that the student notices themselves after they might have sent something out already, or a mistake that a supervisor points out to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. It applies not only when you're a student, a summer, a practicing attorney. I mean, everyone screws up frequently. I mean, I remember walking to my law firm on certain days and just like repeating over and over to myself on the walk from my apartment to the firm, like, don't F up today. Don't F up today. Like that was like all I would say to myself. And if I got through the day without getting yelled at, like that was like successful. So just know that it happens. I think the best thing to do is to own up to it, especially if you catch it. Be proactive, highlight it, try to figure out what the solution is on your own. And if you're kind of grasping for what that might be, then you have to work with the senior attorney or other folks to kind of figure out what to do. And mistakes come in all shapes and sizes. Hopefully you don't experience something major, but if you do, I think it's just a matter of showing that you're committed to finding the solution and not dwelling on the substance of it, but making sure that you learn from it and showing that you're able to kind of attack the problem that way. And we've all screwed up, whether it's missing a filing deadline, or I've actually sent an email to the wrong client just with auto-populate. So to the extent that you can, try to be proactive about those things and just double check, be a little anal retentive when you're sending emails, making sure you've got the right people on the CC line and things like that. But I think it's really about being proactive and just owning up to it and trying to figure out a solution. And not finding a solution on your own sometimes you need to lean in and work with other folks to help you with that.
If I could just briefly add, be humble, apologize, but I don't want to hear you apologizing all summer about that mistake. Move on. I don't need anyone to tell me I'm sorry as the first words out of their mouth every single time we talk. I'm moving on. You should move on. What can we do to either fix it, remedy it, or learn from it? And let's move to the next step would be my advice as well.
What I was going to say is, that is an excellent point, Monica. What I was going to respond to Josh by saying, when the mistake happens and the issue is present, don't be afraid to tell on yourself. It doesn't make you look bad. It actually shows that you care about what you're doing and you care about. So for us, the client is primary, and our clients are people that are often not placed at great importance by a lot of the community. And it is imperative that we have people there that are going to put their interests first and even above their own egos. And so your willingness to out yourself and say, hey, I think I might have told the client the wrong date or given the wrong piece of advice. Can I go back? How do I fix this? How do I remedy this? It shows your desire to really care for that person and to protect them. And that is something that we really, value. So please tell on yourself. It's okay.
Yeah, and just one thing that I was just going to say that probably goes without saying, but the worst thing you can possibly do is to cover it up, whether it's small or big. I just felt like I had to say that because I've seen people try to do that and it usually doesn't turn out well. Someone will find out and it won't look great.
I'm going to give a slightly different perspective, which is I completely agree that mistakes are inevitable. It's going to happen. You should tell someone. Don't cover it up, but avoid mistakes, as much as possible. Okay. So, I know Sean says he doesn't want people proofreading everything. I say, at least for your first assignment, in your first few emails, you better proofread those things. There's no reason you should have a typo. And if you need to do that and not bill for it, do it, because the first impressions are just so critical. And I think these are easy things you can do to make a good impression. And so, and ask questions again to avoid mistakes, because I think sometimes mistakes happen because people they don't know enough, they don't have enough experience, but sometimes those things get caught when we're in communication with other team members about what we're doing, and then other people can help spot the issues.
Yeah, I should have clarified that. I said that to law clerks when I was the one supervising them and I was working with them a lot. But I also said, if you're doing a memo for Don Tamaki, proofread that thing 3 times before you turn it in. But I totally agree with what Josh said. Don't, and others have said, don't run away from the issue. I think that can be more harmful, because then the attorney is just left with the impression that you didn't know what you were doing and you didn't really do anything to try to fix it, or maybe you didn't understand it. I think when mistakes do happen, if the summer can demonstrate that they understood what the mistake was and that they're understanding it, and I can see their thought process, that's actually helpful. It can help them. It can end up being a positive, because I think that's part of what we're looking for and want to see, is what was your process? How did you get there? How do you find solutions? As a law student, we don't expect you to have all the answers and to know everything, of course. And so a lot of it is trying to see how you approach problems and how you try to solve them. And I know as you get more experience, you'll get the answers right if you have the right thought process and attention to detail.
Thank you, everyone. Oh. Okay. So my final question is about career development beyond this summer. So the question is, if a student is interested in your legal sector, or even your specific firm or organization or agency, what can they do this summer to better position themselves as a future candidate? And I think this will be really helpful because some of you start in one sector and then move to another sector, and some of you started in a sector and stayed there. So we'll get a good range of responses. And I think some of you mentioned that you're involved in hiring too. So I'd love to hear your perspective on this. And I'll go in the order that you show up on my screen. So first is Sue.
I think first, when applying to an office like the public defender's office, I'm thinking. I know that they said that I'm a government attorney, which it feels very strange because I feel like my identity and my work is very specific to public defense. Like I'm technically paid by the county, but I'm also paid to fight the county or like the powers that be. So I think my situation or our job is a little bit different, but I think that what I would like to say is applicable to all candidates. When submitting your application, I know that your law schools tell you to err on the side of formality, make sure that you don't have any typos, make sure, all of the things about attention to detail that we've discussed during this panel. I want to tell you the reason why those things are important to me as a recruiter. Because I know that as a law student, you are trying to get a job in the future. And you need to put your best foot forward as a candidate. And if you are not going to exercise that kind of care for yourself, to proofread your own materials and to make sure that your materials are the best possible representation of you, how can I possibly trust my clients, who are some of the most vulnerable people in our population, to you when you don't even look out for yourself like that? Like that is the kind of thing that I'm looking at. So I know that we're talking about proofread your work and make sure that everything's up to snuff so that you can appear your best, but you are also trying to appear your best so that you show people that you can be entrusted with confidential material, with important things that can really affect people's lives. When you are choosing the types of job experiences and volunteer work that you're going to be doing, be mindful of like the kind of story it tells. When I look at a resume, when I look through the different things that they are doing in law school, the different coursework that they've taken, the certificates they've pursued, and the internships that they've done, that tells me something about what their interests are, what their passions are, where their focus is. If they're jumping around all over the place, that tells me they're still trying to find themselves, and then they need to explain that in their cover letter. But if there is no explanation in the cover letter explaining that path, and all I see is like this scattered approach, and then a generic cover letter that has nothing to do with my organization, that tells me that they're a good team player, they can do Excel, PowerPoint, and Word, and they have great attention to detail, and that's it, that doesn't really tell me why it is that they want to be within my organization, where it is actually a group of attorneys that really seeks to live their values through their work. So I think that it's really important for you to kind of be mindful of the mission of the place that you're going to and the type of person that you're showing yourself to be. Finally, I know that this is not the call of the question, but I did want to say this. In your summer internship, think of it as an extended interview. Like that's the one thing that I wanted to leave with you guys from this panel, is that it is an opportunity for you to not only learn about the area of the law and to learn about the culture of the office and the type of the work they do on an intimate level, but to also show the people that you work with who you are, what you're made of, what you believe in, how good your work ethic is. Like all of the great qualities that you can't get through to that person in a 30-minute interview. This is an opportunity to spend 3 months to show them how awesome you are. It is also an opportunity, if you completely, sleep on the job and like don't really care, it is an opportunity to show how all of those things are not present as well. And so on your day-to-day, you don't have to be like super paranoid and like looking over your shoulder about like, I gotta like dance like all the time. But you should think about the fact that like, you know, this is not just nothing. Like this is a way for me to show these people that I want to be here and I'm going to be good. So I know it went beyond the question, but I did want to say that.
Thank you, Sue. Next is Monica.
I agree with everything Sue said, and I think being a public defender and being a nonprofit attorney have a certain have something major in common, and this is a passion project. You don't represent the most marginalized in the community on a day-to-day basis, dealing with trauma and helping to make the world a better place every day if you don't really want to be here. And so, you know, I totally agree. I want to get to what to do in the summer, but actually on the application note, I'm quite surprised by the number of cover letters I get that don't address anything we do. You know, I want to, the cover letter for me is the most important part. Yes, your resume, everything needs to look good. Your resume needs to be good, all those things. But, you know, and on the resume note, actually, if you want to come to a nonprofit like ours, go ahead and highlight what community work you've done. I don't want to see that, you know, you did all IP and corporate and you worked at Starbucks and then hidden way down at the bottom, you know, you volunteer in your community. Stick that up at the top, you know. You think thoughtfully about what you're presenting to us and to make it something that we'd be interested in. And in the cover letter, you know, we want to hear why you're passionate about helping the community. And it's okay if you have diverse experiences in the past. I do, right? I'm someone who came in having a very general civil litigation background. And what you do is you spin that, right? My general civil litigation background, it shows that I can do a lot of different areas. My expertise is in civil litigation, and you can hand me whatever area you want me to do, and I can learn it. And so, you know, whatever your background is, make it appealing to whoever you're applying to. And also read the job posting. We look for people who are bilingual or multilingual. I'm surprised by the number of people that are and don't highlight that, and we don't know that they are in their application materials. In terms of what you can do this summer, so some of you might be interested in nonprofits and might be coming to a nonprofit this summer. If you are one of those people, I would say take advantage of any opportunity you have, not only to get to know us as a staff and the organization, but to get to know how we function as well. Being a lawyer is a lot more than just lawyering. It's a lot more than just representing clients. We all deal with the finances, the business, how we're funded, how our outreach is, you know, our reputations. It depends on where you are, but you know, I like to see people who are interested in how the nonprofit structure works and how they could possibly fit into it. And to understand how we work as a full organization, not just your client work. So definitely use those opportunities. And also, if you're going to a nonprofit this summer, please utilize the opportunities to get to know your partner agencies. We don't work in a vacuum. We work with partner agencies, and you should get to know all of those very important social service agencies that we all work with, because they're all really closely connected and we all know each other really well. If you're not going to a nonprofit this summer and you're potentially interested in nonprofit work in the future, you know, that's great. Get some skills that you can sell to us. We do direct client services. You're at a firm, you know, work with clients, get into court. Tell us about that, because guess what we do? We work with clients and we get into court. So, you know, there's so many opportunities that you can take wherever you are to get the experience that we would be looking for in the future. And also, if you're not going to a nonprofit this summer, but you are interested in nonprofit experience in the future, I highly encourage you to get involved in community advocacy work outside of your day job. Go ahead and join a committee, a board, a law school program, volunteer in your community, and show us that this is where your passion lies. And because that's very important. That's one of the #1 things that we are looking for when we hire attorneys, are people that are passionate about being community advocates.
Thank you, Monica. Next I have Miriam.
I'll give you 3 things you can do if you want to get a job. I think I'm here to represent big law. Our firm has about 200 lawyers, and I still think of us as like medium size, but let's just say 100 lawyers or more. The 3 things I would say is, 1, this is before the summer. Study hard for those finals. Grades can only help you. and they can hurt you and disqualify you from big law jobs. If you need to, use the summer to, maybe you got an extension on an exam because of COVID or whatever, like get those grades up. Number two, I will say wherever you are this summer, do an excellent job, particularly on any analytical or writing projects, so that someone can substantively say what your skills are in those areas. The analytics and writing are critical to big law summer jobs. And then number three, I will say, get to know people wherever you are, show a genuine interest in who they are, what they do, how they got there, with the hope that one of them will be your mentor and be able to provide a reference for you for your next job.
Thank you so much, Miriam. Next is Sean.
Sure. So for, and I guess I'm here for smaller firms. As a smaller firm, in looking at candidates, we're looking for also demonstrated effort to get experience in the practice areas that we focus on. I think it's fair to say that in some larger organizations, it can actually be easier to come in with whatever kind of work background that you have, if you have other great credentials. But I think, we've declined to hire people who had really excellent grades and who interviewed well, but we didn't see them committed to the kind of work that we do, or we didn't see them expressing that they were really, that this was the path for them. I think we look at, does this person have that experience, or at least that demonstrated interest in preparing themselves for a career as a business immigration lawyer or as a plaintiff employment lawyer. And then also I would say, as a small firm, you can, get out and get to know people in the firm before you apply or interview. Sometimes we get prominent attorneys, judges, professors who know an attorney at our office and who put in a good unsolicited word for an applicant. And I find that actually doesn't help the law student get the job as much as you would think. The fact that some distinguished lawyers will vouch for them might mean they're great, but that doesn't mean that student is a great fit for our practice. I think it's actually more often the case that the student gets to know someone in our firm, and through that connection, through that getting to know them, they get to know about us and about our firm and about our program. And then they can share that knowledge in the interview, and that shows their interest in our work and in our firm and our program. And that stands out, and that helps them in the application process. That's just what I've seen in 8-10 years of being involved with the hiring process in our firm.
Thank you. And last but not least, Josh.
Yeah, so I probably two things to kind of piggyback on a lot of the themes that have already been covered. I think the first thing, when you're looking at your next opportunity and trying to get hired and getting in front of people, is just to do your homework. Know who you're talking to. Research the firm, the organization. Find out where they are in the news. Find out what they're doing. I'll share a personal example. When I was incoming 2L, we had on-campus interviewing. It was kind of a scatter shot. I had interviews all day long with a million different firms. I couldn't tell you one firm from the other. I made the mistake of just assuming that all big law, corporate law firms were the same. I walked into an interview with a litigation boutique, and I made the mistake of asking, so how often are you actually in court? And I mean, the response was like very telling, because that's their whole thing. Like, we are litigators. That's what we do. We don't take cases for pre-trial discovery. We're not working on settling a case. We're there to kind of, put the nose to the grindstone and get it done. That was a hard lesson learned. But like I said, do your homework, do your research, understand who you're talking to, so you can make sure that, number one, that's something you're interested in. Number two, if it is, highlight the points of your experience and what you're looking for that actually translate well to what that organization is doing. And the second thing I'd add is, it's never too early to start thinking about your network of folks who are going to be kind of your personal board of directors. I started in a traditional law firm background doing corporate and securities. I don't think I imagined at the beginning of my career that I end up, as in-house counsel at a cannabis company. But along the way, I certainly made connections with folks whose opinions I trusted, whether they're practicing attorneys, friends, colleagues, all of that, to kind of bounce ideas off of, understand from their experiences, and try to really plot your journey based on that. So you have a network of folks you can ask questions of, who can guide you, who get to know you, and kind of, it'll be interesting to see where things go, but you'll never be able to predict what your future steps are right from the beginning. So I think kind of developing those relationships and having a sounding board, just the way any organization does, is important for anyone's personal growth and development.
Thank you so much, everyone. I don't see any comments, so I can go ahead and conclude here. Thank you so much to our panelists for taking time out of their busy schedules to share their wisdom with law students. And thank you to the law students as well for joining us. We hope it was helpful. And if you aren't an ABA member, we hope you'll join us. And we're looking forward to seeing you at future events. Hope everyone has a great Friday and weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.